At 1:12 a.m., the room is dark except for the light of a laptop. 5 tabs are open: a course in psychology, a motion design tutorial, a strategy job posting, a documentary about architecture, and a blank page titled Business Ideas. The person in front of the screen has been doing this for years. They do not lack ambition, curiosity, or discipline. They lack a way to become one person without betraying the others. So they keep searching for the perfect career, the one path that can contain every interest and every possible future self. Because no single path can do that, they remain still. Why does a mind full of possibilities so often produce a life that feels unfinished? Why can someone be interested in almost everything and committed to almost nothing? From the outside, the pattern looks simple. They begin with energy, learn quickly, then become fascinated by another field. Eventually, they begin to distrust their own excitement. Every new interest carries the memory of the last abandoned path. They stop saying, "I'm fascinated by this," and start saying, "This is probably another phase." But the deeper problem is not that they change interests. It is what each interest represents. The designer is the version of them who creates. The researcher is the version who understands. The entrepreneur is the version who escapes dependence. The writer is the version who finally says something that matters. Choosing a career begins to feel like deciding which self is allowed to live. Beneath that decision sits an old belief: a real life must have one clear direction. The person learned to imagine a career as a tunnel. Enter one side, keep walking, and emerge as someone coherent. But their mind does not move like a tunnel. It moves like a map. Psychology leads to marketing. Marketing leads to storytelling. Storytelling leads to film. Film leads to design. Design leads back to behavior. To them, the connection feels obvious. To everyone else, it can look like distraction. So an internal contradiction forms. They want a life with range, but they also want proof that they are serious. They want freedom, but fear looking unreliable. They want to explore, but every exploration reminds them that time is passing. The more interests they have, the more pressure they feel to discover the one that justifies all the others. A new opportunity appears. That is the event. Past experience says earlier choices ended in regret, boredom, or criticism. The internal belief says there must be one correct direction, and choosing wrongly will waste years. The protective reaction is analysis, research, comparison, delay. The external behavior looks like indecision. Underneath, the person is trying to avoid irreversible loss. The activity creates a feeling of movement without the danger of commitment. As long as they are preparing to choose, no future has been fully lost. But no future has been built either. This is the psychology of keeping every door open. At first, it feels like freedom. Eventually, the hallway becomes a prison. Every door remains possible, but the person never enters a room long enough to make it theirs. The central metaphor of this life is not a ladder. It is an unfinished bridge. Traditional career advice imagines success as vertical movement. Choose a ladder, climb it, become more specialized, senior, and defined. But people with many interests see several distant points that somehow belong together. Their mind keeps trying to connect them. A bridge cannot be built from endless horizontal pieces. It needs pillars, depth in more than one place. This is the M-shaped future. One deep pillar may be behavioral research, another may be visual communication, a third may be strategy. Across them runs a wider structure made of writing, technology, history, or design. The person is not valuable because they touched many subjects. They become valuable because they developed enough depth in several areas to connect what other people keep separate. The value does not live inside one pillar. It appears in the span between them. And here is the thought that changes the story. The multi-interest person may not be failing to choose a career. They may be trying to build a career that does not exist yet. Their history looks confusing because they see unfinished courses, short obsessions, side projects, and jobs that never became permanent. But the mind may have been collecting components. None became the final destination, yet each changed how the person sees. Later, when two fields collide, the old fragments become useful. What looked like wandering begins to resemble preparation. But this idea becomes dangerous when it romanticizes avoidance. Not every abandoned interest is a hidden pillar. Sometimes a person leaves because novelty has ended. Beginnings offer quick progress and the pleasure of a new identity. The difficult middle offers repetition, correction, confusion, and evidence of limitation. This is where many curious people escape. A new subject appears just as the old one begins demanding humility. They call the shift intuition. Sometimes it is fear wearing the clothes of curiosity. Breadth without depth does not create an M. It creates a flat line. Many beginnings, few capabilities, no structure strong enough to carry weight. Leaving because a field has become part of your skill set is different from leaving because it no longer makes you feel gifted. One is expansion, the other is protection. In one case, the person has built something. In the other, they preserve the fantasy of potential by avoiding the reality of competence. Real competence requires staying after the excitement leaves. This is why an M-shaped career is built in sequence, not all at once. One pillar becomes the focus for a season, not for life. Long enough to pass through the stage where everything feels new. Long enough to solve real problems and become useful without constant guidance. Then another pillar can be developed. The first does not disappear, it becomes structural. This changes the emotional meaning of focus. For the multi-interest mind, focus often feels like imprisonment because it is interpreted as permanent. One choice appears to erase the others. But a season of depth is not a lifetime sentence, it is construction. The person is not deciding which self must survive forever. They are deciding which part of the structure is being strengthened now. Temporary limitation can create long-term range. Without depth, every interest remains fragile. It cannot generate income, credibility, or freedom. One strong pillar creates stable ground. It allows another interest to be explored without demanding that it immediately become a complete career. Curiosity becomes lighter when it does not have to rescue the person financially on its first day. This is why the most glamorous job is not always the most strategic one. Some roles provide status while consuming every unit of mental energy. Other roles may appear less exciting but preserve attention, time, and emotional capacity. To the outside world, a stable job can look like compromise. Inside an M-shaped life, it may function as scaffolding. It supports construction without becoming the final building. There is also the problem of mental overflow. People with many interests collect fragments, a quote from a book, a visual idea from a film, a pattern noticed in conversation, a business concept triggered by history. Their mind produces connections faster than life can use them. Without an external place to store these fragments, every idea feels urgent. Their inner world becomes a workshop where nothing has been put away. Tools cover the floor. Half-built objects occupy every surface. The workshop is full, but nothing can be made. Capturing ideas changes the psychology of postponement. An interest can be stored without being betrayed. Not now stops sounding like never. Years later, a forgotten observation may become the missing connection between two mature skills. The old interest returns, not as a distraction, but as a bridge. This is how an M-shaped career often becomes visible, late. At first, the pillars seem unrelated. The resume looks scattered. Then one project appears that demands exactly the combination the person has been building without fully understanding it. Suddenly, the past becomes legible. The years were not moving in circles. They were creating distance between pillars so something larger could span them. And now it is 1:26 a.m. The same 5 tabs are still open. Psychology, motion design, strategy, architecture, business. Earlier, they looked like evidence of a person who could not decide. Now they look like raw material. Not all of them will become pillars. Some may remain references. One may be nothing more than an escape from the difficult middle of another. But they no longer need to compete as 5 complete lives. One can become the foundation. Another can become the second depth. The rest can form the intelligence that connects them. The person closes 4 tabs. Not because those futures have been rejected, but because one part of the bridge must be built before the span can hold. The fear was never only that they would choose the wrong career. The deeper fear was that choosing would make them smaller. But the M-shaped future does not ask them to become one thing forever. It asks them to become deep enough in several places that the connections stop looking like distraction and start becoming structure. From the outside, the path may still resist a simple title. But coherence is not always a straight line. Sometimes it is a bridge seen from above. And what once looked like a mind that could not commit may have been a mind searching for the shape large enough to contain it.